Well, my life has always been, since I can remember, it's been about finding freedom, finding love, and basically finding what I consider to be God. You know, we go through life thinking that we know what God is, and the Lord knows many people tell us what it is, but there was always something inside me that was searching for that. My search really started to be very intense when I was in the Army. When I was stationed in the Gaza Strip, which is the worst place you can be in. I had to go for 2 years, so it was an interesting experience. The first part of it was very intense training, getting up very early in the morning, exercising all day long, and learning how to shoot a gun and all that stuff. So even though I always liked to have freedom and to do what I wanted, there was no time. We were so busy in training, and there's no way we could do what we wanted. Every moment of every day, we just had to do what they told us. So my mind became quiet. At that time, I didn't understand why I was happy when I was going through all this rigorous workout. But after the basic training was finished, that's when I was stationed in Gaza, which was really bad. And it was very dangerous to go home, because from the army base to the mainland was about an hour drive, and hand grenades were being thrown consistently. So it was very much like being in a prison in a way, because I couldn't leave. It was actually quite fortunate, because the circumstances pushed me to search very much for something, some kind of freedom. And it just so happened that at that time, my father gave me a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. You've heard of, yes. And I couldn't stop reading it. Every night we had bunk beds and lots of girls in the dorm. And I would read it to them every night. I would sit on my bed and read it over and over and over again. So I couldn't put that book down, and it gave me a very strong feeling that I have to go one day. I will go to India and find a guru. And I probably didn't even understand what the book was saying, but I knew that was where I wanted to go, and that's what I wanted. At that time, my parents had just gone through a very bad divorce, and I was having a lot of disappointments in my own relationships. So one day, when I got out of the base, I went and hitchhiked to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. Now in the Wailing Wall, you write on a piece of paper something that you want, a prayer or something, and you put it in the cracks, and it's supposed to come true. That's really the only connection I ever had to religion. Because my parents were Canadian Jews who were totally atheists. There was no religion growing up in my house. So what I wrote on this note was that I want to find the real kind of love, not the kind that comes and goes, not the kind that is painful all the time. I wanted something, the kind of love that I imagine would come from God, the way that God would love. That's what I wanted, and I put it in there. So then when I got out of the army, I started living in a commune with hippies. I became a hippie, and I lived with a bunch of hippies, all musicians and artists. So I was trying to find my way through drugs. You know, we would take all kinds of, anything from LSD to magic mushrooms, marijuana, you name it. We took it all, and we would get really high and ask, who am I, who am I? And we thought that's the way we're going to find God. One night, I had a very powerful experience in my sleep, in my dream. I was in this room with a lot of people, and suddenly everything disappeared completely. It became completely dark, pitch black. Couldn't see anything. And I didn't know, I felt this presence, and a very, very powerful presence around me. And so I asked it, and not with words, because nothing was happening the normal way. And with senses, I couldn't see anything. But I asked it without words, what is it? And the answer that came to me, again without words, was, I am the power of love. Oh. And all you ever need in your life is love and to love. Shortly after that, I never told anybody about this, but shortly after that, our commune dissolved, and I broke up with my boyfriend. Oh. And again, now I was really wanting something. I wanted some kind of knowledge. I wanted to find something. I knew I had to fill that hole. So I went to visit a friend, and this friend had a wall about like this big, full of books. Every New Age book, Ramtha, Shmamtha, everything was on the wall, every book. So I went through each one. I opened, nah, too intellectual. Open, oh no, I don't understand. Another one, no, nothing. So I was ready to go home, but just before I went home, I needed to use the washroom. On the floor in the washroom were two books. There were two books by Swami Muktananda. And his picture was on it. And one of the pictures, his eyes were so full of love, and underneath it, it says, there's boundless love within. Go there and find it. So when I saw that, and I saw the love in his eyes, I connected it to my dream, and I said, this is what I have to do. I took the books immediately. And it turned out that a friend of ours that used to be in the commune sent it to my friends. So I wrote him immediately saying that I'm coming. Now everyone tried to stop me. My father sent me to a psychiatrist to make me stop, to change my mind. My stepmother offered I had an early inheritance, 25% of a fully paid house. She offered to match that amount if I stayed and bought a house. My boyfriend came every day on the motorcycle, wanted to marry me. Another friend wanted to take me around the world. And my father offered to pay for all my education if I stayed. So, but nothing could stop me. I just knew inside I have to go. If this man could teach me how to find God, then I don't care about anything else in my life. That was my priority. So within 3 weeks, I was gone. So when I arrived at the ashram, he was living in a big ashram in India. And he was a monk, wore the orange and the dot and the whole thing, sitting on a throne, and everyone was bowing to him. And the person who brought me, who sent the books and then brought me to him, his name was Israel. So the Swami, we called him Baba. He asked, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Israel." And then he said, "Well, who brought you here?" I said, "Israel." He said, "Whenever I ask her, she says Israel." Then I gave him a gift. I embroidered a yarmulke, the Jewish hat, for him. And I gave it to him. And when I gave it to him, he said to me, very serious, very prophetic voice, he said, "One day you will realize that you are Jesus Christ." I thought that was a bit strange. The problem with things like that is that it's not very good for the ego to hear things like that. And that actually was the beginning of the end of the purity of my search. Now it was starting to become a spiritual story of having to reach a lofty goal, as opposed to the love, the intense love that I was feeling inside and the yearning for God. So it turned my yearning more into an ambition. The ashram life was very difficult. We had to get up at 3 in the morning and go to meditate, take a cold shower, a cold bath, with a bucket and a mug on us. But because of my army training, it was okay. A lot of people didn't lie. They left after a few days. Because then you couldn't wear shoes in the ashram. So the washrooms were like maybe 5-minute walk from where we were. So in the dark you had to go and watch out for scorpions and stuff like that. Then after we meditated in the morning, then there was a chant at 5 o'clock for about an hour and a half, a chant in praise of the Guru. And basically all day either working or chanting or meditating, working, chanting, no social life, nobody talked to anybody, no TV, no radio, no going outside. And the basic teaching was honor yourself, worship yourself, kneel to your own self, because God dwells within you as you, which by itself is not too bad if you know what that you is, but nobody tells you and nobody shows you how to do it. So what is going within? What does that mean? And the other part is that in order to be able to get it, what that is, you had to be with the Guru for many years. You had to worship the Guru. You had to obey everything that the Guru said. You had to serve the Guru. So only when the Guru is pleased with you, then he gives it to you sometime in the future when you earn it. He even said to us, do as I do, do as I say, not as I do. So there are two main problems with that. Number one is that it's partial truths. Teachings with partial truths are very dangerous, because you have one statement that God dwells within you as you, which you can resonate with because it's true. But there's also the other stuff. So if you believe one thing, now you start to believe everything. It's like, you know, when you go to a psychic, she'll tell you 100 things that are wrong and then one thing that is right, and now you believe everything. That was the second problem. Now, my whole path was outside, not inside of myself, like the statement said. It was outside. Somebody outside of myself was going to give it to me sometime in the future. So, A, I'm not going inside. B, I'm focused on a future that doesn't exist. It's only the now. But by now, my ambition was so strong. So my whole path started to snowball, going on the outside and pushing and pushing, pushing. How hard can I work for him? What else can I do to please him? That's all I can think of, because I knew that if he's happy with me, I'll find God. I gave him all my money. I worked so hard till I got very sick. At some point I went back, stayed for 2 years, and then I went back and forth a few times, and I opened centers for him in Israel and in Canada. And after 10 years he died. And I was very upset because he died and I got, where's my payoff? Yeah. Of course he had a successor after that, but a woman. But there was so much politics.
Oh, I see.
A lot of politics, a lot of fighting over who gets to be what, and so I started to get very depressed and very sick. I felt that something is off. Then, after a total of 16 years being in that teaching, I came to Canada and I found another teacher. Again, I felt this is it. He was a metaphysician, he was a philosopher, he was an artist, he painted, he composed music, and he impressed me tremendously. He had a lot of energy, he was larger than life, he was a very wealthy man, he wore jewelry, and he spoke spontaneously. He can open his mouth and poetry would come out. And he painted beautiful paintings, and he composed beautiful music, and he had a group of singers that he conducted, and they performed all over the world. So I was very impressed. I thought anyone who could speak like that must be for real, because I couldn't. So I started to go to his lectures, and I joined the group, and his lectures were, what I liked about the teaching at first was he didn't talk about a future event, he talked about now. He said things like there's only one event and that is now. He said whatever you're seeking, you already have it now. And he talked about it as being out from inside out. And he was able to explain things that I was never able to understand. And so at first, you know, I was going to all the lectures, and the way it was is he would speak so much, and we'd have to, afterwards we get a transcript, and we have to look out all the words in the dictionary to really understand the deep meaning of what he was saying. And this went on for about another 15 years. And what I didn't realize, which I know today, what was happening is now, instead of having this egoic ambition, look at me, I'm a great devotee of the Guru, now my whole identity shifted into intellectually learning content, knowledge, with my mind. So now my whole path was done with the mind and with the intellect. After he died, and this time I said, no more gurus, I'm going to listen to my own voice. The thing is, when I was with him, I thought that now I finally found the real thing. The India thing was, was, you know, a good beginning, but now it's the real thing. So it was very hard for me, even though I noticed that I was starting to go to other courses and reading other spiritual books. It was very hard for me because I kept asking myself, if I found the real thing, why am I still searching? So it bothered me, but I felt like something was still missing. And so I tried to go more into, I read all of Eckhart Tolle's books. I didn't understand any of it because I thought, oh, it's just like what the other teacher said. Shortly after my second teacher died, I started to get these recurring dreams. It kept coming back over and over and over again. And in this dream, a man would approach me. I never saw a face, but he would embrace me. And as soon as I felt the embrace around me, it was, I felt this incredible peace. It was such incredible silence that I would completely melt into it. So I had this, and this dream would come over and over again, and it would be to the point that I could almost, it was so tangible that sometimes I would go wash the dishes and I would feel the same presence behind me, and I would look around, but there was no one, and I didn't see a face. By this time, I was almost 18 years single, alone, and I was starting to feel like it's time to find a partner. I was starting to want it again. And I always felt that, how would I know, the way I would know who the right person is by it, when this man would hug me, I would know, I would recognize him, that's what I was looking for. I didn't understand the dream. I didn't understand what this peace was. All I knew is it felt so good. So, and about a few years after that, I got into Abraham Hicks, and I wanted to do law of attraction because I wanted to improve my life. I made a list of what I want in a man and what I don't want in a man. I got into all of these things. And then one day, a friend of mine wanted me to start a meetup, which is online, you meet friends and you meet together if you have something in common. So she said, why don't you do an Abraham Hicks meetup? Then we'll meet people who are interested in Abraham Hicks. And I didn't want to do it because I was so tired of organizing things, and I didn't want to belong to anything anymore. But she didn't have a credit card, so I said, okay. And one day I get this email and from a man, and he says, I can't come to the meeting, but how would you like to go for a coffee? And I thought, well, this is odd. But then I saw his name in the bottom. It was Gabor Harsanyi. And I thought, wow, what a strong name. And I thought, oh, this man must be Persian. This might be very interesting. So I said, okay. So we decided to meet at Starbucks. So I'm going to Starbucks, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, looking around to find some tall, dark, and handsome dude. All of a sudden, Gabor comes and says, are you Nurit? I never saw his picture. He saw mine. So I was very surprised. And I said, oh, I thought you were going to be Persian. He said, no, I'm Hungarian. So we sat and we talked, and it was amazing to find how many things we had in common. I had a spiritual background, he had a spiritual background, he studied other things, but we had so much to talk about. And we went out for about a month. And I was amazed to find somebody who listens the way he does. I've never met anyone who actually listens. You know, people always interrupt, or they're thinking about what they want to say while you're talking and all of that. This man never interrupted. He was just there. He was just present, and I felt I can say anything. And he was just there. And I also noticed that he never tried to impress me. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. I was like, well, maybe he doesn't like me. But he just never tried to impress me. I was the one who tried to impress him. I thought I had all these spiritual teachings in my background, you know. And he just listened. But after a month, I found that I had other issues with him. First of all, I wasn't with a man for a long time. And then I noticed that he wore sandals with socks. I said, who wears sandals with socks? And then he wore the same shirt twice, for 2 dates in a row, the same shirt. And he lived in Chinatown. I said, who is this man? You know, I haven't been with a man for so long, and I don't know about this guy, so I backed off. But what happened was that within the next 2.5 years, we kept bumping into each other, either at singles parties or at spiritual lectures and stuff like that. And one day we met at a barbecue, and we started talking. And it was wonderful because we could always speak about spiritual things that were interesting because I didn't find anyone else interesting ever. I dated other guys, but everybody wanted to talk about how they're renovating their basement or how their grandchildren are doing or stuff like that. And I couldn't get anyone to talk to me about something real. And we started talking about what what he was doing spiritually and what I was doing spiritually. And at some point I asked him, so you're present, so now what? My mind couldn't wrap itself around, what does it mean? What do you mean present? What do you do with that? And looking back today, I realized, of course I couldn't. The mind doesn't know what presence is, any more than it knows what it is. And then he said to me something that really shocked me. It was the first shock that I had with him was, he said, and it wasn't in a judgmental way, it was a very matter of fact. He said, the difference between what you do and what I do is that what you're doing with the law of attraction and the teachings that you have, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's all in the mind. Whereas what I do is not in the mind, it's just presence and it's not in the mind. I was so agitated. I thought, how could this be? I was just spent 15 years with a teacher that talked about transcending the mind and talking about you're not the mind and going beyond the mind. And I was sure that what I was learning and what I was talking about was not in the mind. But then, of course, the mind doesn't know what is beyond the mind. The mind doesn't see the mind. But I still didn't get it at that point. I was just very, very agitated. So he saw that and he said, well, let's just agree to disagree. I said, okay. And we met one more time. But still, you know, the same Tiva sandals with the socks and the same shirt. And I don't know. I came home and I said, no, not for me. Time goes by, 2.5 years later, I get this feeling in me. I have to call him. I have to call Gabor. I don't know why, but I need to talk to him. Even if nothing happens, at least we'll be friends. And then the other voice would come in. Oh no, you're a woman. You don't call a man. You've been practicing to be a monk. You don't. You've been alone for 18 years. You can't do that. And this is going on and on for 3 weeks. And one day I'm sitting at lunch at work, and I called my daughter first, and I said, you know, I really want to call him, but I don't know what to do. She said, Mom, just call him. So I said, okay. Hung up the phone and called him. And it was a most wonderful conversation, and we decided to meet that evening. So I was going to pick him up. I went with my car. I had a car at that time, and I drove. Suddenly, in the middle of my route, I stopped and parked at a school parking lot. It suddenly dawned on me that the only reason I haven't clicked with this man is because I keep judging him. I don't like his shirt, I don't like his it's like all these things I have about him. So I sat down, and it was kind of like a meditation. I don't know what to call it, but I decided that I'm going to go to the meeting without any thought whatsoever and without any judgment. No matter what happens, it's going to be okay. I'm just Gonna look at it, not as good and not as bad. No commentary, no thought, no nothing. So I sat there and I just, for 10 minutes, I just decided to feel. I didn't know what I was doing. And I decided I'm not going to think. And I started to dissolve, all thoughts dissolving, dissolving, dissolving. And I'm just feeling and feeling and feeling. And by the time I got to the meeting, we went to dinner. It was wonderful. At some point he teased me because I was trying to boast about some course that I took where we learned to do two-pointing, which is where you focus on 2 points and you do some kind of healing that way. I don't want to get into it, but at which point he said, oh, two-pointing, two-pointing. And being a nice pious woman, I started to feel this thing coming up. I said, no, you remember what you promised yourself. I made a commitment for myself. And I put an end to that. And I realized today that that was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Not just because of what transpired afterwards as a result, and now that we're together, but what it taught me is that nothing good comes from thinking. Real fruit, real benefits come when your mind stops. A real manifestation, the true manifestation comes when the mind stops. And then after dinner, we went to my place and he gave me a hug. And it was the exact same stillness and same peace that I felt in all those dreams. And I knew this was the man. And I knew that the only reason I didn't recognize it for the last 2.5 years is because my mind interfered. That's when I realized what an important decision was, not just for that moment, but for the rest of my life. To remember that when the mind interferes, we don't see what's right in front of us. We can't feel what's in our hearts. Shortly after that, I said to him that I felt that he had something special, that he knew something that I was looking for. I didn't know what it was. I said, I can feel it. I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. And I said, I've been with a lot of fake teachers. In fact, my ex-husband was a fake teacher. So I know fake when I see it. Nobody can fool me anymore. But when I look at you, I know you're not fake. There's something about you that I know is true, even though I don't know what it is. And I can't explain what I feel, but I know it's for real. So he taught me what he teaches today to everybody. The simplicity of it, which was, feel your hand. I looked into his eyes. We looked at each other. And I felt my hands. I felt my feet. And then I started to feel what he was calling the inner energy of the body. And at that moment, I found within myself, I did not have to look for it outside. It was not coming from him, it was not coming from a teacher, it was not coming from a book, it was not coming from a seminar. It was not coming in the future. It was right now, here at this moment. I was feeling what I've always been looking for inside myself. I didn't understand it, I couldn't explain it, I couldn't describe it. Which I know now is the difference between all the other teachings that are out there. There's so many teachers say, oh, it's within, go within, go within, go within, present, be in the now. This is the only one event, and that is now. And everyone talks about it. But it's not any of those things. It's not a thought of being inside. It's not a thought of stilling the mind. It's not the mind stilling the mind. It's impossible. It's not a psychic experience. It's not astral traveling. It's not an emotion. It is impossible to describe it. People have tried to name it God, tried to name it love, tried to name it conscience. It's beyond name. But it's unmistakable. And it's right there. It was my birthright all along, but it's so simple that I never even saw it until my mind stopped enough to hear somebody and to be in his presence. Because what I saw was I was able to get it through him because he was there. He provided that space, that empty space for me to walk into. And I realized that I couldn't get it from my other teachers because they weren't there. This is a very different kind of teaching. You can be a boxing coach without ever being in the boxing rink. You can be a piano teacher without ever doing a concert. But this is not knowledge. This is not imparting knowledge or content. This is pure being with someone, being present with someone so that they can be present. You hold that space for them that they can walk into. And if he wasn't there, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have gotten it. And that was quite a great revelation for me. And that was also confirmation that, yes, he wasn't fake. This was the truth. This is true. And now, looking back, I could see that all the other teachings that I was involved in were mind-based. The mind is very clever. The mind has invented all kinds of spiritual paths and all kinds of ways to do it with the mind. Because the mind, once you go into the body and you feel that presence, and once you're in the present moment, the mind can't live there. It doesn't want to die. So it has to create its own spiritual path to keep you as far away from truth as it can. That was an incredible moment for me. The other great shock for me was that after that experience, I was just so overjoyed by having found it. And I thought, my God, this is so amazing. He looked at me and he said, I just want you to know, this is it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, no, this is the it. The it. What is the it? And he shook me. He said, no, this is it. This is it. There is nothing else. This is it.
Okay.
And I was shocked. I was, what do you mean this is it? You mean there's no other technique, other book, other seminar? I was already enrolled to a few other seminars, and I had all these books that I was ready to read. And what do you mean? No, this is it. There is nothing beyond this. What you feel, what you're experiencing right now, at this very moment, inside your body, that presence, is it. There is nothing else. There's no visions, there's no explosions, there's no kundalinis, there's no chakras, this is it. There's nothing else that you need. There's nothing else to find. The search is an illusion. The more I searched, the further I got from this is it, from home. The more I wandered, the further I was from my own birthright, my own home. With all the promises for a future attainment, and somebody else is going to give it to me, and it's out there, it's out there, it's out there. No wonder it was so hard, and no wonder it took so long and so much money. I already owned it, for crying out loud. It was mine to begin with. That was astonishing. It was, the mind was disappointed. The mind wanted something flashy, like, my teacher that was so creative and spoke such beautiful, elegant words and wore all those beautiful clothes and had all these musical parties in his home, and the other teacher with the, being a monk. Oh, it's so romantic to be a monk. Or is it? It was so simple, and it took 40 years to see how simple it is. The mind doesn't want to know that it's simple. We're complex people. We want to make things difficult. And then I had another very important question for Gabor. I remember it like it happened yesterday. I was on the phone with him. I came home one day from seeing him, and I said, "You got to help me with this. You got to help me with this." I said, "What is it?" You're teaching me. The whole teaching is to feel the body, right? Yes, yeah. To feel the body, yes. But for all my other teachers and everything I ever studied was about that you're not the body, that you shouldn't identify with the body, you should transcend the body, transcend the senses. My first teacher called the body a shit factory. He used to tell stories about when you eat a plum, a nice, juicy, fragrant plum, and how it comes out is quite different. And that's what happens when a nice fruit goes through your body. What's the body? It's a piece of dirt. The other teacher called the body chalk, water, salt, protoplasm, and slime, all slung together in the bag of time. He also used to say, you can't put the greater into the lesser. God is so great, you can't put it in the lesser, which is the physical body. The body is physical, it can't be the body. You have to transcend it. You have to go beyond the body. And then the other teachers talking about astral traveling, leave the body, go to other realms and meet other beings from other dimensions. Holy gamoly. I said, this is what I came with to him. And he explained something wonderful. He explained that the body is the door. The body is an amazing door. The body can function by itself. It pumps the blood. It does the whole circulation thing, the breathing, the muscles, the bone. Everything works on the body so much better than we ever can imagine. No doctor even knows about it. First thing that happens to us, we call the doctor. The body has all the answers. It knows what to do. It's brilliant. Universal intelligence runs this whole mechanism. All we need to do is go inside and be with it, feel it. That's where the kingdom is. It's the door. And what I realized from that is very important. I realized that all this stuff about don't identify with the body, it's the mind's con job to get us away from the body. Because when you're in the body, the mind dies. It doesn't survive there. It's not the ruler of the body. It wants to be. But we don't really identify with the body. That's not true that we identify. Who identifies with the body? If we really gave even a little bit of attention to the body, we wouldn't be eating what we eat. We wouldn't be smoking. The body tries to talk to us. When we take our first cigarette, we start coughing like crazy. That's the body telling us, don't do that. But we don't listen, and we keep smoking, and then the coughing stops. Because the body figures, why am I going to talk to the schmuck? He doesn't listen to me anyways. So who listens to the body? Nobody is identified. We don't identify with the body. What we identify with is the stories that our mind creates about the body. Do I look good? Do I look fat? Do I look good in this? Am I intelligent enough? Is my body smart enough? Is my body strong enough? We identify with the stories. Am I spiritual enough? We have all these built-in stories and concepts about the body. That's what we identify with. Nobody identifies with the body. But the mind had to create a spiritual teaching. It says, don't identify with the body. Transcend the senses. Meanwhile, that is the instrument and the senses as well. By focusing on your hearing and your seeing from the inside and tasting from the inside. Those are instruments that take you back home. Throughout the years, we've been together for almost 5 years, I've been learning so much about the falsity of other teachings and how the other teachings trip you. It's like anything else in life, you know, something new comes up. You know, people think that in spirituality everybody's honest. No, they're not. What I was doing with spirituality is what I was doing with everything else. Mm-hmm. The ego trip, the ambition to succeed, it was like anything else. Mm-hmm. What I realized too is that the teachings that you go through until you find the truth, people say, oh, it's a good preparation. No, it's not. They're not stepping stones.
Oh, yeah.
They're blocks. So many people come to me and say, oh yeah, I think I like this presence thing and I like this being in the now stuff, but I've never read a spiritual book in my life, so I need to read a few things first so I have preparation. And I think, no, you don't. And that's what I want to tell people. You don't. You don't need to spend time in India. You can do those things.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with them. But go inside first. Then you can enjoy them. But it's not instead of, you're not going to find anything out there. It's not in a book. It's not in a course. It's not in anybody else but yourself. But to find it, it's very helpful to have somebody with you who can hold that space for you, because the mind won't stop. It goes. It just won't stop. And there are teachers today that teach that.
Yeah.
You know, Eckhart Tolle is one of them. I never understood him before, but now I do. Now I know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Before I never did, because I was trying to understand it with the mind. And the other beautiful thing I learned is about, I used to be, in the other teachings, we always had to cultivate spiritual behavior.
Oh.
We had to in one teaching, we had to smile all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Show that
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
happy.
yeah.
You always have to have good thoughts. You always have to be positive. You can't show any emotion. You have to practice this and to be vegetarian, or you have to do. No, you don't. The only duty, the only responsibility, the only obligation, if you want to call it something, is to go inside and to hold God's hand.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what that was my prayer. That's what the note that I put in the Wailing Wall, and that was the dream that I had about that peace. Just go there. Everything else happens. When you're in that spot, you're generous.
Yeah.
When you're in that spot, you're compassionate. When you're in that spot, you're loving. You don't have to go, you don't have to be like that, but you're peaceful, and people feel it. That's why our whole relationship is based on presence, and we never argue. Ever. We don't fight, we don't argue, we don't split hairs about opinions, we don't try to outsmart each other or one-upmanship one another. No. This is very loving and peaceful.
Yeah.
Another very important observation that I've had now that I've been living with Gabor for a while is that he is not different when he speaks and as he is at home. With my other teachers, it was very different. They would sit on the throne and they would be one way, and my first teacher was a monk, and he preached celibacy, and after he died, there was a big scandal. We found out that he was sleeping with 16-year-old girls. Of course, he said, do as I say, not as I do, so it's okay. That's okay. And the same with the second teacher. You know, he would speak beautifully to us, and behind, I thought I was fortunate because I got to be a lot in his home and see a lot of things, and they weren't the same. He wasn't the same, and he was talking against marriage and against being in couples, and he himself had a male lover. He talked about loving each other, and meanwhile he was bad-mouthing other people behind their back. So there was no consistency, and I become very aware of that, and I watch for that because I was fooled for so long. My eyes are open, and when I see with Gabor, he's always the same. There is no difference in his reaction whether I correct something that he did, correct him, or praise him. There's no difference. He doesn't go, it doesn't go to his head. He's even. I've seen him go through very happy things, good experiences, and also through very difficult times, like when he had his heart surgery. And he's the same.
Yeah.
He's present. He knows how to go inside, and he has the same peace around him. He doesn't criticize. I've gone through very difficult times undoing my past, and I've had moments of crying, and many moments of crying and depression and letting go. And he's the same with me. He's always the same presence, the same space, the same loving, compassionate presence is there every time, whether I'm praising him or whether I'm going through hell. It's always the same. People from my past assume that I'm putting Gabor on a pedestal, like I used to do with my other teachers.
For you also.
But first of all, I can't do that anymore. Second of all, even if I did, it wouldn't work. He doesn't go on a pedestal. He's not interested in pedestals. He's with his sandals, he's simple. When you're present, when you're inside, when you're holding God's hand, there's no difference.
No?
There's no higher and lower. Even the statement that my previous teacher said, you can't put the greater into the lesser. There's no greater and there's no lesser. There's no good and there's no bad. There's no such thing. There's no pedestal. The only thing on the pedestal is the ego. And it's time to take it down and for the inner self, for lack of a better word, or the presence, or the not, whatever you want to call it, to be on the throne. The inner being, the inner consciousness that you feel inside when you're present, that's what sits on the throne. And when that is on the throne, no one else is. Or everybody else is.